4 locations today in the 2 buildings. So here in the recreation center, we have the ballroom in this room. And then there's the community room, which is, if you leave the ballroom, it's a right and a right, or you can go straight out these doors. It's right across there is the community room. And then in the senior center, we have sessions going on in the Laurel room and the Sequoia room. So the buildings are next to each other. To get to the senior center, you just exit this building and walk straight towards the building that has a big pavilion over it. It's about a 1-minute walk. And then when you enter the senior center, just go straight, and the 2 rooms are right next to each other in that hallway. If you go to the back cover of the back of the cover of the agenda, there's pictures of both buildings in case you need a little extra support. There's the rooms located in each building, and then you have a list of the sessions that are assigned to each of those rooms to help you out. The rest of the agenda book, there's a 1-page description and speaker bios for each of the sessions, followed by a page for note-taking for each of the sessions. So for all of the sessions, we have County TSS here, County Tech, attempting to record all or most of the sessions today. The recordings and the slides for most of the sessions will be uploaded to the suicide prevention website and emailed out 4 to 6 weeks after the conference today. I just also want to give a reminder that this is very heavy content. We do very difficult work, so please take care of yourself throughout the day. The outside grounds of this community center are really lovely. There's a fountain out back. You can take a walk, get some fresh air if anybody feels the need. Please also keep that in mind for others, that others are bringing their own experiences in today, and we don't know what those experiences are or what they're going through today. So please be gentle with one another as well. This includes the conference presenters, the volunteers, and the staff who've all worked really hard to make this conference possible today. Okay, so while you're in this room today from the ballroom, we invite you to check out the Authentic Selves photo exhibit that's along the wall and along the table over there. Authentic Selves is a book and a traveling photo exhibit, including photographs and interviews with people of all ages who are trans, non-binary, and gender fluid, along with some of their family members. They use first-person accounts and beautiful images to seek to challenge damaging myths and stereotypes about trans and non-binary people and contribute to the process of dismantling the destructive power of prejudice and intolerance. Thank you. It's over here. So Authentic Selves is a tool to prevent bullying and increase empathy and connection, and in this way help to create safer environments. And this is really why we wanted to bring it to the conference today. So when you get a chance, please come and check it out, interact with the exhibit, feel free. All right, basic needs. So bathrooms. Both buildings have bathrooms. In this building, you go out to the right and the right. There's a bathroom right there. In the senior center, when you enter, you just go straight down the hall and there's a bathroom there as well. There's water fountains and water filling stations located throughout both buildings as well. The one here is right outside of the ballroom over there. And then again, in the senior center, the same hallway, just go all the way down and there'll be water there. Lunch is back here in the ballroom. We will have open seating, or you can sit outside. There are some tables out there. We encourage for you to meet somebody new, network with your fellow attendees and presenters during that time. During lunch hour outside in the courtyard, we're also going to have some resource tables going on. So please feel free to check those out. And then lastly, we have open Wi-Fi. The name is Sunnyvale Guest 2, and there's no password. So you should be able to log on pretty easily. After all this, if you still need some help, we have volunteers and location guides located throughout. I believe they are wearing volunteer t-shirts that look like this. Oh, thank you. Christina's in the back giving a wave. Christina's got one of the volunteer t-shirts on. Thank you very much. So look for them. They can help you, direct you to where you need to go. All right, we're almost through the housekeeping. Photographs. Please help us commemorate the conference today and help us take some pictures. This is the QR code for you to upload the pictures to our Google Drive. We have some photographs of the QR code located in each of the session rooms as well and throughout the conference. If you have trouble with the QR code, you can also email it to our email address, suicideprevention@hhs.secgov.org. There are some not presenters, all of the presenters have agreed to be photographed. There are some participants when you registered who were asked if they prefer not to be photographed to wear a dot. I think it's yellow or some red, thank you. They're wearing a red dot, so please don't photograph those participants. Everyone else is okay. We do not have a closing session today for this conference. So we're just asking that at the end of the conference today, after you go home, or ideally before you go home, you scan the QR code and complete the conference survey. We'd really love your feedback. We incorporate it every year to help make this conference better. It's on the second to last page or last page of the agenda book inside the cover. Okay, also because there's no closing session, I want to just start off with the thank yous and the acknowledgements. There's a lot of thank yous listed at the end of your agenda book, including all of our wonderful suicide prevention stakeholders, partners, and volunteers. Thank you for your ongoing support and your support with today's conference as well. To our elected officials, Supervisor Ellenberg and Senator Cortese, who are going to make the time and attend and speak today at the conference. Thank you to our keynote speaker, who you'll hear from very soon, Ben Geilhufe, and the rest of the conference presenters and tablers, and to the Sunnyvale Community Center staff and the County TSS tech staff for hosting us and for helping us out today with all the recording and technology. Last of all, these 4 photos here, I would love to give a special shout out to the suicide prevention team at the county. They're pictured here. If you wouldn't mind standing up. Oh, 3 of you are here. Evelyn, if you could please stand up. And Jasmine is over there. Give them a big round of applause. Thank you so much, especially Evelyn Quintanilla led the organization of this conference, which gets bigger and better every year. Amazing. Very lucky and happy to be working with you all. You're so dedicated and hardworking, and it's really a pleasure. And thanks for keeping a sense of humor when things get tough. Okay, so how am I doing on time? Very well. Okay, so we have 5 minutes. I wanted to give folks a minute to connect. So if you could just turn to somebody around you in your vicinity that you don't know, maybe just introduce yourself and share what brings you to the conference today. We'll do that for a couple minutes, and then we'll come back and meet Supervisor Ellenberg. All right, let's wrap up the introductions. Looks like that went well. We're going to get started again with the welcome address. If you could please take your seats. I'm glad you're having a good time meeting one another. All right, so I'm going to introduce Santa Clara County Supervisor Susan Ellenberg. Supervisor Ellenberg represents a diverse population of just under 400,000 residents in District 4. This includes the unincorporated community of Burbank, much of West San Jose, and the cities of Campbell and Santa Clara. Supervisor Ellenberg serves as president of the Board of Supervisors, as well as the chair of the county's Public Safety and Justice Committee, and the vice chair of the Finance and Government Operations Committee. She's a member of the California State Association of Counties Executive Committee and a board member of First Five Santa Clara County. Additionally, she is a co-chair of Joint Venture Silicon Valley and on the board of the National Association of Counties Justice and Public Safety Steering Committee. Supervisor Ellenberg's always been a strong advocate for behavioral health and suicide prevention in the county, and we really appreciate your making the time to join us and give the welcome address today. Thank you.
Thank you for all being here, for all of you for being here today. It's both heart-filling and deeply saddening, truly, to see such a full room to talk about such an incredibly heavy topic. A core responsibility of the county organization is addressing mental health and substance use disorders. Wow, this is weird. Let me just stop for a second and center, because this is a topic that we are intellectualizing, that I have lots of information to share with you about. It's a topic also that is personal and painful, and sometimes jumping in too fast is just not the way to start. So I'm taking a breath. I would invite you to all do that with me as well. Feeling a little bit more centered. Thank you. One of the biggest, most serious challenges in our county in addressing mental health has been destigmatizing the issue. Certainly the pandemic and its impacts brought mental illness, mental health to the forefront in a way that it hadn't been before. Not at all because this was a new crisis, but because somehow during the pandemic, it became almost not okay to be okay. And I think the conversations that so many of us had about struggles, and certainly so much acknowledgement and support for children and youth and teenagers who were struggling, not being okay was okay. In January of 2022, my colleague Supervisor Lee and I led our county in declaring mental illness and substance use disorders a public health crisis. Again, not because this was something new, but the impact of making that kind of declaration, if it's going to be impactful, is what follows. And what has followed is a message to our county executive, then Dr. Smith and now James Williams, that this is a board priority. This is where we want you, our administrator, to be spending most of your time. This is where we want to prioritize resources. And this is where we need a strategic plan so that we're not just saying, oh, we care so deeply, but this is the number of beds that we need because far too many people are on waiting lists and do not make it to treatment in time for when they need it. We need to build out our workforce, because even if miraculously we had the funding for all of the services and had the beds, doesn't do us any good without people working. So the strategic plan that we have put together focuses on all three. It focuses on available slots, inpatient and outpatient. It focuses on the number of beds that we need, and I'll say a little bit more about that. And it focuses on the size and level at which we need to build out our workforce, literally to what positions are needed. the state of California contracted with RAND to do a statewide study for how many mental health beds were needed at all levels of acuity, from locked, secure to board and care. We did our own study for Santa Clara County, also with RAND, to make those determinations for all of us, and that has helped guide our strategic plan. And what you can count on and what you must hold us accountable for is that this county does not stop, does not lose focus, does not divert funding until every single person in this county can get the treatment they need at the level they need it, exactly when they need it. That has to be the goal. According to NAMI, let's talk about first what happens when people are not getting that treatment, or sometimes when they haven't even been diagnosed and nobody knows that they may be in need of treatment. According to NAMI, the National Association of Mental Illness, 46% of people who die by suicide had a diagnosed mental health condition. But research suggests that 90% may have experienced symptoms of a mental health condition that went undiagnosed, that may have gone unrecognized by the person experiencing them. Again, our declaration is an effort to build on a foundation of work that is being done at the county level, at the state level, which is exciting as well, and at the community level with all of you. One set of statistics in particular breaks my heart every time I see it. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 14. The third leading cause of death among those aged 15 to 24, and the 12th leading cause of death overall in the United States. That deserves a breath and a pause as well. Knowing all of the progress that our county has made does make me hopeful, certainly as does looking around at all of you. Between 2011 and 2020, Santa Clara County's suicide rate, which averaged about 7.9 individuals per 100,000, was consistently and significantly lower than the state average, which was about 10.4 per 100,000, and the country's average, which was about 13.3 per 100,000. Yay, it's good that our numbers are better. Our numbers are still way too high in this county, in the state, and in the country. The fact that our numbers are lower, though, I want to celebrate, because it's because of the work of folks like you, as well as in partnership with the county. The County Suicide Prevention Program was created in 2010 and continues to grow and innovate, and I'll share some examples. As of 2023, every city in the county has passed a suicide prevention policy. That was an 11-year effort by the Suicide Prevention Program and stakeholders, and I was personally very proud to work with Vic Ojakian to encourage my colleagues in Campbell and Santa Clara, which are two of the cities that I represent, to sign those resolutions. Santa Clara may have been the last. Thanks. It's a tough thing to do, because certainly it's not that anybody is against suicide prevention, but with all of the talk about destigmatization, there is still a reluctance amongst a number of council members in cities across the county to draw too much attention, as if we'll increase rates or encourage people by being too public or too out there. Our program initiated research and work around ligature safety when hanging started becoming the most common method of suicide in the county. This innovative work in the field was highlighted nationally by the American Association for Suicidology and by SAMHSA. In partnering with Stanford, the program also published an innovative tool called Tempos to evaluate the media's messaging on suicide. Tempos has been disseminated also nationally and highlighted before the U.S. Committee on Energy and Commerce, the Health Subcommittee for that group. In 2020, the state DHCS featured the county suicide prevention program as one of 2 exemplary MHSA programs in the state. And last year, the program was awarded a Stanford University Community Partnership Award in recognition of collaborative efforts between the university and organizations that tackle real-world problems and advance the public good. This is the 4th suicide prevention conference for Santa Clara County. And looking at the room and hearing the numbers, the highest number of registrants to date. Again, I am so grateful to all of you for being in this work. It is challenging, and I hope that every single one of you also has the support that you need to deal with this very, very traumatic subject. The caregivers always need caregivers and need to support one another, and I hope and trust that this day will provide a lot of that. I will end with a personal note as well. I am deeply and personally committed to suicide prevention. My aunt died by suicide, and my brother has struggled with persistent major depressive disorder. One of my children struggles with mental health challenges that have led her to the brink of significant harm, and if not for organizations like many of yours, our outcome would be catastrophic. These are people that I love, people who should have command over their own stories, frankly, to decide when and with whom to share them, and here I am doing it very public, just because I believe that it's so important to speak up and to share our own stories and to make sure that this issue is not only heard on a policy level and is not only granted the funding that we need to actually do the work, but that it is personal to probably most, if not all, of the people in this room. So again, I commend you, I thank you. I want you to count on the County of Santa Clara continuing to be a partner in this work. I would encourage any of you to reach out to my office because there are always gaps, to tell me where you think we are not working sufficiently, what we may not have thought of, and where are the opportunities to iterate and to do better. I hope that this day is filled with meaning and inspiration, and as well as tough moments. I hope that you leave feeling fulfilled in your souls and ready to continue doing the work that you do every day. Have a wonderful conference, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Ellenberg, for both intellectualizing, but more importantly, humanizing this topic and grounding us today for the conference. We're gonna move from one suicide prevention champion to another. It's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Ben Geilhufe. Ben is a queer transmasc therapist, trainer, and consultant, goes by pronouns he, him. Currently, Ben is developing an outpatient gender-affirming care clinic for the County of Santa Clara, which will support trans and gender diverse clients ages 5 and older. Before this position, Ben was the director of community-based clinical programs for the UCSF Child and Adolescent Gender Center, where he provided clinical training and consultation on gender diversity for professionals throughout San Francisco County. Ben also developed and taught the inaugural full credit course on psychotherapy with transgender and gender diverse clients for Santa Clara University's Counseling Psychology Master's Program. And in all of this free time, in his private practice, Ben supports individuals of all ages with gender exploration. It's really a privilege and an honor to work with Ben in the county, and we're really grateful to have you here today for the keynote. Yeah, do you want to use it?
Thanks. Thank you so much, Mego. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm honored to be here, and I'm just going to do some rearranging really quickly. Just making a podium. It is an honor to be here. This is a hard topic to talk about, an important topic to talk about, especially for the trans and gender diverse community, of which I'm very proud to be a part of. And I come to this place with about 20 years in the gender field in terms of being an advocate, and 15 years as a clinician. So working with youth, working with adults, so working with folks of all ages within the gender field. And suicide intervention and prevention is such an important part of the work. And I'll give you a context for why. Why are we focusing on this community today for this conference? But first, I wanted to give just a little bit more of an overview of what this county is supporting. So this clinic that we are building, and I have coworkers back here that are supporting this, we're collaborating and co-building this together, is the first of its kind in this county and the first of its kind in many counties. So I feel so appreciative to our county for putting finances and resources to building out services for gender diverse folks specifically. So we'll be offering individual, group, and relational therapy, as well as peer support services like resource linkage and navigation, peer support groups, one-to-one peer support, and psychoeducation. We'll also have a psychiatrist, so we'll be doing med management, which is phenomenal. So we are building this program out right now, and when it is built out, I will be letting folks know. Give me just 1 second. Okay, that'll be all right. Sure. So an overview of what I'm going to talk about today. That's great. Thank you. So again, why are we focusing on this community? Why is it so important to focus specifically on gender diverse folks when we talk about suicide intervention? What is the legal landscape, including access to care for TGD youth and adults? So how are our laws impacting access to care right now in the United States? This is a very contentious topic. There is so much going on right now. And even standing here as a trans person and as a provider, I felt some fear about talking about these pieces today in front of you all and having it recorded. And I'm in the process of scrubbing all my personal information from the internet because of attacks on trans folks and because of attacks on gender providers in the gender field. So I want to say that really clearly to you all so that you have a context for what it's like to be operating within the field and then to be a part of the trans community as well. Then I'll talk about discrimination as trauma. So we really hold a trauma-informed lens when we think about oppression, when we think about discrimination for the community and how we actually support the community. I am talking as a clinician to you, so I'll be holding the clinical framework quite a bit. And I know there's other providers in the room, there's school-based folks, and so hopefully this will be applicable to all, and I will be coming from a clinical framework. And then I'll focus on key protective factors. So what do we do? With all of the information that I'm going to give you, what do we do? How do we move forward to actually build out our systems to support all genders, not just cisgender folks, not just transgender folks, but folks of all genders? And then I'll share some resources specific to the gender diverse community for suicide intervention. This is a brief keynote. This is a brief speech. So if you are hearing things and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what that means, I don't know what that is, hopefully this encourages you to research more. Feel free to reach out to me. I'll have my email address up, and I'll also give other resources. So this is a beginning point for you all if this is new to you. So why are we focusing on the gender diverse community? We know, and Supervisor Ellenberg said some of these statistics as well, that suicide is the second leading cause of death among young folks ages 10 to 24 years old. But we also know that LGBTQ folks are more than 4 times as likely to attempt suicide as their cisgender heterosexual peers. We also know that in terms of the gender diverse community, they are further 2 to 2.5 times more likely to experience depressive symptoms and to attempt suicide compared to their LGBTQ peers. So what we know is within gender diversity, it is a compounded risk, significantly compounded. And there's an institute in LA that just found that 27% of adolescents within the state of California now identify as gender diverse in some way. I'm sure many of you have heard the narrative that why are so many more people identifying as trans? Is it contagious? If kids at school are talking about being trans, are their friends gonna be trans because it's cool or popular? So this is a really common narrative that caregivers come to me with a lot of anxiety about, and I understand the anxiety. But I want to slow down here for a minute and talk about how we as a society actually prioritize cisgender individuals. So we prioritize folks whose gender experience aligns with what they were designated at birth. So the doctor holds you up, says, oh, you're a woman or a girl. If you feel that way inside, that is that alignment of the cisgender experience. And that is what we assume is everyone's experience. But we know actually that that's false. Gender diversity has existed forever and across countries, across cultures, globally, worldwide. With settler colonialism here in the United States, the gender binary was reinforced, meaning that there's only 2 options, male and female. But that's actually it's inaccurate because we have intersex folks, so folks with really normative, naturally occurring physical variations in their sex characteristics. And we have folks who identify differently in terms of who they are, who we know ourselves to be, like me, as a transgender man. What we are seeing is with more resources, folks are talking about it more, especially youth. As they see themselves reflected more in social media, in Instagram, in books, in clinics that you operate, or classrooms that you support, they are talking about it more. So we are seeing more disclosure around identity. For adults, we know that 40% of adults have attempted suicide at least once in their lifetime. So that's almost half of the community has attempted suicide at least once in their lifetime. And 82% have seriously considered suicide. 82% of a community, and that includes myself. So if I had not connected with, actually it was a high school teacher and then a college professor that supported me in getting access to resources because my family just wasn't there yet, I don't know if I would be standing here today. So these numbers are very, very deeply personal to me, and they're also intensely high, which really clearly points to the fact that this is a public health crisis. We're in a public health crisis around supporting gender diverse folks. So let's talk about politics and what's happening in terms of legal discrimination here in the United States and how that actually impacts how we feel about our identities and ourselves. So here are some examples of laws that are currently attacking gender diverse folks in the United States. The ACLU constantly tracks anti-LGBTQ laws. I had to submit my slides last week, so this is an updated number as of last week. It's probably higher today. And for my own mental health, I did not look. I noticed some pretty significant SADs, even preparing this slideshow. And the SADs is how I talk about it, especially with youth. Pretty significant depressive symptoms to hear about how much this is impacting my community. So we have 496 anti-LGBTQ bills in the United States, and we only have 4 states that have 0 bills, only 4. And the purple talks, if the purpler the state, the more bills there are. You'll notice that California has a slight hue of purple. California is not one of the states that has 0 bills. In 2023 alone, 80 anti-trans bills have been passed out of 22 states. And these are the main buckets that those bills are in. So starting with sports, so that includes any type of gendered sports team. So this is barring trans and gender diverse folks from participating in gendered sports teams. Bathrooms, barring trans and non-binary folks from using the bathroom that aligns with their gender experience. So in a state, this would mean that I would have to use the women's restroom, to be very clear to you what that means. Education, there are a few different things happening with education. Number one is curriculum bans. So banning teachers from talking about the history of gender diversity, like I just told you about, that it's existed forever, across cultures. Can't talk about it. As well as teaching about gender diversity within schools. And then another piece with education is the forced disclosure bills that are coming out. And you may have heard of that. We have them in California. And so forced disclosure is if a student tells a teacher at school, hey, I'm thinking about my gender, they have to tell the caregivers within a set amount of time, and usually it's about 3 days. I want to say really clearly as a pediatric gender provider that youth relationship with their parents and caregivers is incredibly important. And one of our main goals, clinical goals, is increasing communication between youth and the caregiver, increasing trust between youth and the caregiver. The issue with forced disclosure bills is that sometimes the youth is not ready and needs support in finding the words. Also, sometimes family systems are not in a place to receive this information, and folks are facing emotional and physical discrimination, harassment, victimization, even abuse. So this is something we're very aware of and concerned about. So again, my role as a clinician is to support a youth in disclosing to the caregiver and supporting a caregiver and supporting the youth. But these bills create a forced timeline, which is deeply concerning. And lastly, healthcare. There's a ton of bans around youth accessing gender-affirming healthcare. That includes puberty blockers, that includes gender-affirming hormone therapy like testosterone, which I still take and will take for the rest of my life. So to imagine what that looks like, youth who have been accessing gender-affirming healthcare for years with the full support of their parents now no longer can access that in this state. So it's if I would have to go off of gender-affirming hormones and deal with what would happen to my body around that. So these are really significant things happening in the United States. Now up to date, 49 states have introduced or passed anti-trans bills, and 19 states have banned gender-affirming care for youth. So let's talk about California specifically, because this is a lot of heaviness, a lot of difficulty, a lot of lost access to care, especially for our youth, but also for our adults. So here in California, we are very lucky, y'all. As providers, as folks who are supporting youth and adults, we have lots of protections in place for us to do so, including anti-discrimination laws, as well as of January 1st, California became a sanctuary state. Yeah. So what this means is that youth cannot be prosecuted if they come here for care. They cannot be prosecuted. We are also trying to work towards passing the SHIELD bill, which would protect California-based doctors if they gave care to youth coming from out of state. This is a really important bill that we're trying to pass. It is not passed yet, but it would create further protections for our community of providers as well as youth. I told you about the forced disclosure bills. So 2 districts have now required the forced outing of youth to parents. That's Chino and Orange County. As well as multiple districts have now banned the pride flag. So that's something that happened just in the last week. So there are really significant changes happening even here in California as well. 5 states actually consider it a felony to provide certain type of care to minors, and it's the states with the red dot, which you can't really see very well, but like Idaho, Nebraska, or excuse me, North Dakota. So these states actually make it a felony for providers to provide care. So there's a lot of fear around providing care, around supporting trans and non-binary youth, and around being trans and non-binary within the community right now. So let's talk about discrimination as trauma, different types of discrimination, and how this really significantly impacts crisis symptoms like self-harm, like suicidal ideation, and then potentially results in attempts. So there are lots of different types of discrimination that folks face within the gender diverse community. I put this slide up with a lot of text intentionally because it's overwhelming, and I want there to be an embodied experience of overwhelm when looking at the slide. Starting with number 1, legal and policy discrimination. This is what we've been talking about, so laws barring access, folks not being able to even participate in the military, which did occur, right, due to gender diverse identity. Healthcare discrimination, experiencing bias within the medical field, including trying to access affirming providers. we know that the laws and policies that I just talked about, the Trevor Project did a study that said that 94% of youth are impacted by those policies, of course. So 94% of respondents were like, yes, I'm really impacted by this. And only 50% were able to access mental health care for support. So it is incredibly difficult to find providers who know anything about gender care and who can support gender diverse folks and their family systems. Rejection, this is just facing rejection around identity from family systems, from school systems, from work. Workplace discrimination, difficulty finding a job based on your gender identity, facing discrimination at job based on your gender identity. That includes misgendering, being dead named, not being able to use your accurate name on your badge, not having your pronouns respected while you're at work, not being able to access the correct restroom while you're at work, not feeling like there's a safe place to go while you're at work. I'm just naming lots of different things. This is true for school environments too. And if we actually think about youth not being able to go to the bathroom all day long, what are the impacts of that on their bodies and then on their access to learning? Can we learn when we are focused on really having to pee? I'm gonna say it really directly. No, it's really hard. That also impacts health, physical bodily health, not being able to use the restroom or fear of having discrimination in the restroom. And there are so many other types of discrimination that I'm not naming today, really due to time, but we'll talk a little bit more about other pieces in a minute. The last piece that I did want to name, though, is not having access to really important information for our bodies, like safe sex for all bodies, all different types of body types, is another form of discrimination. So when we go through sex education, we don't learn about body diversity and gender diversity. Some districts are starting to change that and actually do, folks who are at school-based, do you teach about trans, non-binary bodies and safer sex for all bodies at your districts? Anybody? There's one. One out of this whole room. Yeah, applause for that. But that is a really important piece to notice, one out of this whole room. This is a graph that shows the percentage of LGBTQ students who feel unsafe at school based on three things. The yellow circle is gender identity, and the gray circle is gender expression. Those are the two things I'm going to focus on. So if we look at all trans students, 83% felt unsafe based on their gender identity, and 72.8% felt unsafe based on their gender expression. And gender expression is how we do gender, like nail polish, what we wear, how we gesticulate, how we move our bodies, how we do gender. In terms of genderqueer and non-binary folks, 54% felt unsafe based on their gender identity, and 61.8% felt unsafe based on their expression. So again, to slow down and highlight what the realities of these numbers mean, is well over half of folks are feeling unsafe. This talks about the known cases of fatal violence against trans folks in the United States, looking at 2013 to 2017. The dark color on the bottom is trans women. The lighter gray is trans men, and then the very light gray is non-binary and other identity folks. And you can see overwhelmingly here that trans women are targeted for fatal violence. This was a collaboration between the Human Rights Campaign and the Trans People of Color Coalition. You can see the full report if you Google it. This slide really focuses on the fact that we cannot take gender experience out and separate it from the holistic human. We have to think about intersectional identities. This is another piece from that report. They looked at fatal violence focused on race and ethnicity, and they found that overwhelmingly Black or African American folks are targeted for fatal violence within the gender diverse community. And this is one of my favorite Audre Lorde quotes: "There is no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives." So what are the impacts of all of this on mental health, on overall health, on our physical health? How do we integrate all of this reality, what is happening for our communities, into how they present in schools and clinics, and how do we support them? This is the gender minority stress model, which was created by a group of predominantly trans and non-binary researchers, which is phenomenal. It's based on the minority stress model, which is really popular within psychology. They looked at how distal stress factors, distal is outside of our bodies, the things that happen outside, correlate or impact or integrate or interact with proximal stress factors, which is what happens inside of our bodies, and how that interacts with resiliency factors, what builds our resiliency, and what happens, what are the outcomes of all of that. So they looked at, for distal stress factors, 4 main pieces: gender-related discrimination, of which you heard about some, gender-related rejection, so outright rejection. And that sounds like, I'm going to refuse to acknowledge you by your accurate name or pronouns. I'm going to refuse to talk about your gender at home with us. You can go to your grandfather's funeral, but you cannot come out and you cannot dress like that. So that's actually a personal experience that happened to me. And then gender-related victimization, harassment, discrimination, attacks, violence, and then non-affirmation of gender identity, which can be silent, a silent non-affirmation, and a very loud non-affirmation. So just refusal to acknowledge or outright saying that is not okay, we're not going to talk about that here. Proximal stress factors include internalized transphobia. And if we think about all of the laws and policies that are happening in the United States, if you think about what we read on CNN or hear listening to this speech, a lot of the narratives that is built is who I am is not okay. If my access, my human rights are being debated based on my gender identity, my gender experience, who I am is not okay. So that really creates this feeling of, I am not a right, this is not okay, it is not okay to be trans. That's that internalized transphobia. That also creates negative expectations. So if we go to the doctor and the doctor doesn't know how to support us in our gender diversity, or if we go in for a cold and the doctor is saying, okay, so how far along are you in your transition? What surgeries have you had? We expect to have those negative interactions in the future. And then what happens is many folks drop off and don't access services. So over 30% of trans folks do not access medical care because they have a fear of being discriminated against or have not been supported, so they expect that to happen again. And of course, concealment is the last piece. We don't disclose. We don't talk about who we are because there isn't a safe way to do so. The resiliency factors that they found are 2. Number 1, community connectedness. So are we connected to community? Do we know other gender diverse folks? Are we embedded in community? Because that really combats isolation, and isolation builds shame. So the way to decrease shame is to connect in community. And then pride, a sense of pride and identity, which is incredibly hard to build, y'all. It's incredibly hard to build that with all of these narratives happening, but it's so important over a long period of time. And I often say pride is not an immediate thing. It's not a light switch. It's not like you come out, you're going to feel a lot of pride. But that is one of our main goals, is to build pride and identity. So all of these pieces interact to create the outcomes of mental and physical health. So of course, when stress factors are high and resiliency factors are low, mental and physical health has less positive outcomes. But if we have higher resiliency factors, we can have more positive outcomes around mental and physical health. The trauma tree is the second model that I use to describe understanding discrimination as trauma. The trauma tree has been around for a long time. I've just adapted it for the gender field. So in this model, the roots of the tree are discrimination and oppression. So these are all the things that folks face on the daily. Some examples that we already talked about: misgendering, inability to come out, emotional and physical assault due to gender identity, being disowned, not going to the bathroom for fear of discrimination, kicked out of the military, and having our human rights debated. So these are just examples of the roots. From the roots is the tree trunk, which is an experience of shame. And my favorite definition of shame is from Brené Brown. She talks about shame as the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. Something we've experienced, done, or failed to do makes us unworthy of connection. So those 2 pieces, we are flawed, we are unworthy of love and belonging, that is what is internalized for folks. And that's what lives in that tree trunk, that shame. And then the branches of the tree, that's what we see in our classrooms and in our clinics. So this is what folks present to us with, the mental health symptoms that folks present with. So that includes depression, anxiety, hypervigilance, addiction, process addiction, like eating disorders, avoidance, panic attacks, aggression, self-harm, and suicidal ideation. So unfortunately, most of us are trained to just treat the branches. We are just treating anxiety with DBT and CBT. But if we are not looking at the roots of the tree, meaning the discrimination, meaning access to the bathrooms, meaning accurate language, we are not actually effectively treating the holistic human. Mental health symptoms are really highly correlated with harassment and trauma experiences, and victimization and discrimination are strong predictors of suicidal ideation. So we must address the roots. And we have research that really now identifies this link here. So treat the whole tree. So what do we do? How do we do that? Well, here are some ideas of ways that we use the gender affirmative clinical model, and that's what I operate from. That's our main model in the United States. This is how we support trans and gender diverse folks. So the major premises of the model are gender variations are not disorders, and this is in red because it's incredibly important. This breaks down that piece around my identity is not right, something around me is not right, I am flawed, I am unworthy. No, gender variations are not disorders. Gender presentations are diverse and varied across cultures, requiring cultural sensitivity. Gender may be fluid and is not always binary. This is the big one, and I'll clarify it because oftentimes it doesn't make sense in the beginning. If present, individual pathology is often secondary to negative interpersonal and cultural reactions to the client. So what that means is if there is pathology present for a client, it is not about them and their gender experience. It is about how the culture or society is interacting with them, the discrimination that they're facing. So the main treatment goals in this model are pretty clear, and it makes a lot of sense, but I think a lot of folks just haven't heard this language before. So we facilitate a true gender self. We facilitate gender health. We alleviate gender stress or distress. We address the roots. We build gender resilience, and we secure social supports. So really connecting to community, building shared experience and universality, supporting folks getting access to housing that will support their gender diversity, medical care that will support their gender diversity, employment that will support it. And oftentimes this is a lot harder than we would hope or think it would be. So in terms of your systems of care, what do you do? What are some kind of general ways to think about supporting all genders, again, versus cisgender folks and transgender folks, but how do we support all genders? So I split protective factors into two pieces, one for your systems of care and one for the individual, thinking about the client or the student. So for the systems of care, it's really important to provide crisis resources specifically for TGD folks, and I'll share some with you. Assess your agency for gender-affirming systems. The next slide is all about that. I'm going to give you a list, and it's just a beginning point. So if you want more information, Fenway, the Health Education Center, has amazing resources for gender inclusive or gender affirming systems. Again, that's Fenway Health Education. Build in ways to navigate discrimination and bias experienced by TG clients and staff. Make it a really explicit system when folks come into your school or come into your clinic that they know if they experience discrimination, this is who to talk to, this is the grievance process, this is how they communicate it, this is who will support them. Provide training for staff on serving TGD folks. So this is an example of that. And again, I appreciate the county for supporting this topic here today because it's so important. And ensure that all of your systems are gender inclusive, meaning, do folks have access to locker rooms that are supporting of their gender identity, their gender experience? Do folks have access to restrooms that align with their gender experience? Are your restrooms single stall, all gender single stall restrooms, which is actually a requirement here in the county of Santa Clara? So thinking about gender inclusive systems. And again, this is a snapshot overview. So if you're seeing this and you're like, I don't know how to do this, there are so many resources that will support you. For the individual, protective factors, again, community connectedness, which we talked about a lot today, working towards that sense of pride and identity, building out shared experience. If we see ourselves mirrored in other people, we actually build more of a sense of self. When we do not see ourselves mirrored, like in media, in movies and shows, there's this, there's a dissonance, like I don't exist. So we really want to increase more representation around trans non-binary folks and make sure that our clients see that. And seeing ourselves reflected in lots of different spaces, physical spaces, virtual spaces. So here are just some examples of gender-affirming systems and ways to assess your agency. So again, having a non-discrimination policy that explicitly protects gender identity and having it available for folks to read and see when they come into your clinic. Making sure that your intake paperwork includes sections for name and gender marker on insurance card and accurate name so that folks see their accurate name and pronouns wherever they are interacting in your clinic. And this includes the next bullet. So everything that a client or student sees must reflect their accurate language. In school systems and in clinics as well, we only need to have legal information in a locked file in one place so that we have it for billing or that we have it for whatever we need. But everything that a student or client sees needs to be accurate. Identify your pronouns. I have mine here. Identify your pronouns so you're cueing that you know what pronouns are and you're creating space for folks to identify theirs. We're not forcing folks to identify theirs, but you are stepping into that position of power saying, I know what this is. Let me visibly cue that I support you in doing the same. Like I said, all single stall restrooms are labeled as all gender restrooms. Have lots of flags. I don't know if you've been to the Q Corner. It's a partner agency. The Q Corner is a community-based resource center. It's peer-run. They have so many resources for LGBT folks, and their drop-in space is phenomenally flagged. When you walk in, you see all of the flags and all identities represented. And then have books, magazine, pamphlets, resources, again, that highlight gender diversity so that when folks walk in, they see themselves reflected there. And engage in regular audits. What can you do more of to be more gender affirming? So I want to give you really specific examples of how the Q Corner and how our clinic, the Gender Affirming Care Clinic, are building out what I just talked about to give you tangible resources to walk away with. So the Q Corner offers lots of trainings for providers if you need more information. And I recommend, even if you don't feel like you need more information, regularly check in because our field changes constantly. Like I said, I updated this PowerPoint probably 3 or 4 times before I finally sent the slides to Mego and her staff, and probably could have updated it again. So get more information. They offer an Understanding Gender Attraction and Expression training, which is a SOGI 101, Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity 101. So if you're looking for that baseline information, it's great. They offer a writing the support letter for gender affirming health services training for clinicians, as well as comprehensive care for gender expansive and transgender youth. So if you are serving pediatric gender diverse folks, this is phenomenal. They offer lots of groups. This is that building that shared experience, building universality. I'm not going to go through each one, but they are really focused on building out groups for intersectional identity experiences, focused on gender diversity and sexual orientation. And our clinic will be offering even more groups for folks registered within the clinic, hopefully in 2024. They offer free gender-affirming garments, so things that support embodiment, garments that support folks with feeling in alignment with their gender identity and gender experience, and they do this for free. And then my clinic we offer a monthly clinical consultation virtual space for providers. So this is really specific for providers who want to come in and process cases, ask questions about supporting gender diverse folks. And so we meet the first Friday of every month. This is open to anybody within the county or participating in county contracted agencies. We welcome you and support you to come in. If you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to me, and my email will be up in just a second. So I only have a minute left, so I'm going to go through these a little bit quickly. But you will have the slides. So these crisis resources are incredibly important because, for example, the Trans Lifeline is staffed completely by gender diverse folks for gender diverse folks. So when someone in crisis calls into this hotline, they know that they will not have to explain what being transgender is or what not being supported by their spouse or their child or their caregiver. They won't have to explain those elements of discrimination that we talked about already. So it's an incredibly important resource. It is call only though. Many of the youth that I work with don't want to call anybody ever. So I also give them the Trevor Project, which is a 24/7 call, text, and chat access line, which is great for folks aged 12 to 25. Youth are way more likely to use that. And they also offer Trevor Space, which is like a drop-in online space for building universality and connectedness. It's great. We want to make sure to identify, That's a great question. I need to double check. I believe they offer Spanish resources. They do not offer Vietnamese, but I need to double check. Thank you for asking. We don't want to only prioritize younger adults and youth. We want to prioritize our elders too. So the LGBT National Senior Hotline is excellent for folks 50 and over. They have really, not really limited, but they have more limited hours than a 24/7 access. So make sure to give the hours when you give this resource. And then Blackline is a hotline geared towards Black, Brown, Native, and Muslim LGBTQI folks. They offer crisis counseling, and they offer confidential avenue to report negative, physical, or inappropriate contact with the police, which is a really phenomenal resource. This is available to you if you email QC Resources at our Really Long County email address. You can also email the Q Corner at the Really Long County email address. These are our well-being and suicide prevention resources for our community at large, the LGBTQ plus community here in the county of Santa Clara. So if you don't have this yet, I really highly recommend that you get it. It's up in my office as well as it's available in the Q Corner. So again, I just want to appreciate all of you for giving your time and attention, for learning more about trans and gender diverse communities, the very, very high levels of crisis symptoms that we are experiencing in our community due to discrimination, the fact that this type of discrimination really compounds into trauma and complex trauma, and for considering what can you take away from this talk today to build out in your agency, in your system of care. Because I think the goal is that talks like mine no longer need to happen. And so what is something that you can take away so that you are supporting all genders within your system? And thank you so much for all that you do. Question? Okay.
Yeah, there's a question. Let's take a question. Oh, go ahead. Thank you. I also just want to thank you so much, Ben. I want to shout out a lot of the Q Corner staff are here today. I see you all. If you could just give a wave. They're really awesome. I love my she, her pronoun pin. I wear it all the time at work. So they have tons of swag, tons of flags. So reach out to them if you can if you can get a chance today during the conference. Thank you so much, Ben. That was incredible. Such important information. And more importantly, thank you for your vulnerability and your courage in speaking to us today. I definitely felt that. I have so many kind of emotional responses to that presentation. I hope you take a little bit of that inspiration, fire, whatever it was that came up for you into the conference, which is starting now. So we have a 10-minute break. I think it might be a little less than 5 minutes now. You have 5 minutes now to get to the first session, which will start at 11 o'clock. Have a great conference. Thank you, everyone.